Have you ever woken where everything felt familiar but slightly wrong? The book's in place, the blanket folded, yet a mug filled with stars. In that quiet shift, the borrowed room mystery begins to breathe.
Series The Glitch Files.
I woke to a room that behaved like mine, the way a memory behaves like a place. The light found the wall where it always did, but it clung there longer, as if it had grown shy. Dust lifted in the beam and then settled, unhurried. My blanket kept the same fold it learned from 100 other mornings, a crease like a coastline. Everything was correct enough that I felt the first calm thought, home, followed by the second, smaller thought, almost. The air had a sound in it, a warm thread of hum that reminded me of the hours just before a summer storm. Not loud, not alarming. It lay beneath the silence like a bass line under a lullaby. When I breathed, the room seemed to breathe too, a faint lift of curtains where no breeze moved. I sat up and let my feet find the floor. The wood met me with that familiar cool, the way a friend puts a hand on your shoulder and says nothing. My bookshelf recited the titles I know by spine, the worn blue poetry book, the old guide to coastal birds with a cracked plastic cover, the thrift store astronomy text that still smelled like someone else's house. I counted them, not for inventory, but for reassurance. Counting is a form of holding. It did not take long for the differences to arrive, small as fish surfacing once in a wide lake. The framed photo of my mother, for instance, wore the same silver frame and smiled the same half-smile. But the background behind her shoulder, the kitchen window, showed more sky than any kitchen window I remember. A horizon had crept into my past without permission. On the dresser, my ceramic dish for keys had the right chips at the rim, but none of the scratches inside, as if the little circles of life had been polished away. And on my desk, where there should have been a coffee mug with a chipped handle and a tea stain shaped like an island, there sat a mug I had never owned. White, simple, a little too clean. When I leaned closer, faint stars drifted in its glaze, pale points of light that took their time crossing the distance from one side to the other, like they were deciding between staying and moving on. I could have told myself I was still sleeping. I could have told myself I had rearranged things without remembering, the way you sometimes do in the gray hours and forget. But the room was precise in its kindness. The blanket kept my warmth. The calendar at the wall circled today in my handwriting. The house-shaped shadow on the ceiling appeared at the same angle it has since the neighbor added their porch light. If the world were testing me, it had done its study. The journal on my desk was the invitation that didn't need words to be understood. It lay open to the middle, like a patient book caught mid-breath. The paper was the kind I buy, smooth, almost creamy to the touch, with a narrow line that pulls my handwriting into something smaller and tidier than I am. It belonged to me, in the way a path you walk every day belongs to the soles of your shoes. And yet, I could not remember leaving it there. I keep my journals in a stack by the bed, with a pen tucked inside like an anchor, and the topmost one had gone to sleep last night with a blank page. This one had its right margin smudged as if a left hand had pressed its heel there and waited. I read the first line and felt the room lean closer. Teach us how to long. The words were in my handwriting, rounder than usual, as if softened by someone else's hand, guiding mine. Beneath the sentence, my script broke into lists that I would never have made in that order. What does a Sunday smell like? Which rain is the one you remember? Where in your body do you hold the sound of opening a door after a long absence? The questions did not feel like mine, and yet they had strolled through my head on other days too. They had stood behind me at windows. They had touched my shoulders when I looked at the sea and could not name the shade of blue at the edge. I sat and let my eyes move down the page. Someone had drawn small signs in the margins. Not letters, not shapes exactly. A loop that almost closed but turned away at the last moment. 3 dots arranged the way a constellation would if it were fortunate enough to have only 3 stars. A line that trembled, then steadied, then trembled again. They were nothing to be afraid of. They shone faintly, the way a spoon will catch morning and send it back to you. I touched the paper, the way you touch a sleeping friend's hair, careful not to wake them if they are not ready. The page was warm. The journal had been waiting under a lamp. My fingerprints left no oil, or perhaps they did, and the paper accepted them completely, taking them in the way sand takes a heel. This is how I know the day was not a simple dream. The house answered when I moved. The floor creaked where it always creaks, 2 boards from the wall, and its second creak responded from somewhere inside the wood, a soft echo I could feel in my ribs. I opened the drawer where I keep envelopes and found the same nest of old mailers, rubber bands that always snap when you least want them to, and the little copper paper clip I have carried since childhood because it looks like a tiny fish. But tucked beneath the last stack was a piece of fabric I did not own. It had the loose weave of something handmade, the color of dusk after rain. When I lifted it, it unfolded by itself into a small square, and for an instant the hum in the room rose, just enough for me to hear the rhythm of it. 2 beats gathered close, 1 beat far away, like footsteps I could not place. I laid the fabric down and returned to the journal. A page had turned on its own. I had not seen paper move like that except near a window, but the window was closed. On the new page, there was another sentence in my script, patient as before. We borrow your dreams because you keep them better than we do. I read it twice. The first reading made me smile, small and helpless, at the idea of anyone believing I keep anything well. The second reading found the place in me that had been empty and put a chair there, as if to say, sit, we will be here a while. The thought grew arms and leaned slowly, lightly against my shoulder. We. Whoever wrote that word intended it to include me.
When I lifted my eyes, the room held itself in that quiet way it does when you are watched by something that wishes only to learn you. The curtain breathed again. The light on the wall released its shyness, then settled back. The star mug at the desk let one little point cross from the handle to the lip and pause there, as if catching its breath. There are mornings when you look at your life and it feels like someone else has been living it gently in your absence. This was one of those mornings. I felt no urgency to prove or disprove what was happening. The hum had become a good companion. The questions on the page had opened a window I could carry around. I found the pen in its usual place and held it above the journal. The nib made a small shadow that looked like a bird about to land. I did not know whom I was answering, only that I wanted to be kind. I wrote slowly, listening to each word arrive from wherever words come before they are written.
Longing sounds like a door in winter. It feels like a small ache behind the throat. It is heavy and bright at once, like fruit you have not yet eaten, hanging over a path. The hum approved, or I imagined it did. The mug's drifting stars formed a line that reminded me of a curve my father used to draw in the air when he wanted to show the path of a thrown stone. Outside, somewhere, a quiet truck moved down the street, and the sound wrapped itself around the room without entering. I turned the page and tried to tell whoever was listening that longing is not only sadness, it is also a lantern. It shows you shapes of possible rooms and makes you choose which doorway to stand in. It keeps you awake, kindly. It is the part of love that keeps your hands open. If this was a dream, it had the courtesy not to tell me. If it was a message written by my own sleeping hand, then my sleep had become very careful about its penmanship. If it was something else, if "we borrow your dreams" meant there were others in the house, kind enough to leave the hum to keep me company, then I did not want to startle them with sudden movements of doubt. I wrote until the pen grew warm and my fingers began to mark the page with soft half moons where they held on. When I paused, the room gave me a gift. From the corner of my eye, I saw a small object where my potted plant should have been. Not a plant. A little thing like a seed case, translucent, with a skin that almost shimmered the way heat does above asphalt. It sat in the saucer as if it had grown there overnight from nothing particular. I noticed my breath had slowed to match the hum, and that felt like the most normal thing. I did not pick it up, not yet. I watched it, the way you watch a sleeping animal, respectful of its right to dream without interruption. The seed case brightened, then dimmed on a pulse that had nothing to do with electricity. When the light passed through it at a certain angle, I glimpsed 3 faint threads inside, braided, then unbraided, then braided again. It was not flashy. It did not demand. It existed with the certainty of things that know they are allowed. In the journal, new lines had appeared. Not words at first. The loop that almost closed drew nearer to closing, as if it had reconsidered. The 3 dots drifted closer together. The trembling lines seemed to borrow steadiness from the room. Then my script returned in a single, unhurried sentence. We do not know how to keep the stories after we wake. I said, quietly, without meaning to speak at all. I can show you. There was no reply in sound. The reply was the softness that unfurled in the room, as if the air itself had nodded. The light deepened the way late afternoon light does, but it was still morning, and I knew the clock would not object. The seed case showed its 3 threads more clearly, and I could see that each thread was not a thread, but a tiny sequence of marks, as if someone had tried to write with light and language at once. I opened the top drawer of the desk. The old stack of postcards from places I have never been greeted me with their cheerful rectangles. I chose one with the picture of a lighthouse I admire and wrote in my careful, awake hand the names of 5 smells that mean home to me. Cinnamon, the first cut of a new bar of soap, wet pine, sea air at night, this room when the window is open, then closed. I laid the postcard beside the seed case and felt like I had placed bread on a table. I do not know what made me think the hum wanted music, but I touched my phone and scrolled to the playlist I keep for rain. When the first piano notes found the air, the hum tucked itself into them the way a stream will take the shape of a stone and keep going. The room felt pleased. I felt useful in an easy way, like holding a door for someone whose hands are full. The star mug cooled beneath my fingers. I put water in it, only water, and when I drank, the taste was like water has always tasted, more honest than any other thing. A thin track of condensation circled the mug when I set it down, and in the wet ring, the small 3-dot constellation appeared for a second, then faded, like someone saying hello and not wanting to be a bother. I do not know how long I sat there, but the hum moved with the piano, and the curtain practiced its gentle breathing. When I finally reached for the seed case, it accepted my touch without changing its pulse. It weighed nearly nothing. Inside, the 3 light threads rearranged themselves, not at my command, but as if noticing something they wanted to align with. I lifted it to my ear the way a child listens to a shell. The sound was not the sea, it was that soft rhythm I had been hearing all along. 2 beats close, 1 far. I held it a little longer and understood, not with language, not yet, that the far beat belonged to a place I did not know. The journal waited, the page waited, even the light waited, and in that patience was the first feeling of a bridge. I wrote 1 more line, the way you do when a letter writes itself and then pauses, asking for a sign that the reader is still there. I will keep what you borrow until you can hold it yourselves. When I looked up, the seed case answered in its way. The 3 threads braided, unbraided, braided again, then settled into a shape I did not recognize, but recognized the feeling of. Relief, maybe, or trust, which is relief with a little future in it. No one in the house moved. No phone glanced awake with a message. The morning stayed exactly as it had promised to stay, with its soft corners and its small quiets. If the world beyond my window had opinions about this arrangement, it kept them. I rose and opened the window. The outside air came in and touched everything lightly, like a teacher might touch a student's shoulder while passing. The room did not change shape. It only breathed a fraction more deeply. Far away, a gull called once and then thought better of it. The piano reached a note I love and let it ring. That was when the last gift of the morning arrived. On the final line of the open page, below my own words, a sentence appeared slowly as if written from a distance by a steady hand learning the weight of ink. "We will come again when you sleep." The day went on with its ordinary face, but it wore the memory of that morning like a shimmer around the edges. I moved through hours that tried their best to convince me of their plainness, making tea, answering a message, folding the blanket at the couch. Yet, beneath it all ran the soft echo of the hum, low enough to doubt, steady enough to believe. I carried the seed case in my pocket. Its weight was nothing, but its presence was more than weight. Each time I brushed against it, a warmth greeted me, the way a hand might graze yours as you walk together without speaking. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? A seed filled with light, a journal that wrote back, a room that rearranged itself kindly. These belonged to a category of truth that sounds like story when spoken aloud. So I kept them folded inside me, like a secret note pressed close to the heart. When night arrived, I returned to my room as if returning to a conversation paused mid-sentence. Everything waited exactly as I had left it. The mug still held the faint star shimmer in its glaze. The journal lay open where the final line had appeared. The ink as fresh as if someone had only just leaned away. The seed case pulsed lightly in my hand. I settled beneath the blanket and allowed sleep to take me gently, like a tide lifting someone who has stopped resisting. The last thing I remember before slipping away was the curtain's slow breath, a quiet rhythm that matched my own. I woke, or dreamed I woke, in the same room, though everything was painted in softer tones. The wood of the floor glowed faintly, as if polished with light instead of oil. The books along the shelf hummed like bees behind glass. My hands carried no weight, yet when I looked down, I saw faint strands of brightness weaving between my fingers, like the seed case had opened inside me. On the desk, the journal turned its pages without touch. Each page fluttered with the sound of wings, then stilled on words that were not mine. They appeared letter by letter, curved and careful, my handwriting softened by another hand's attempt at mimicry. "Show us how you choose one life and not another." I read the words slowly. They felt like hands testing the shape of clay, eager but cautious. I thought of all the little choices that had carried me here. What tea to drink, what book to read, which street to walk home. How could I explain that each decision is both trivial and monumental, a series of threads weaving the same fabric? I closed my eyes and pictured the roads I hadn't taken. I let the hum beneath me rise, and with it came images. Myself as a painter standing before a canvas, bright with unfinished skies. Myself as a teacher, chalk dust softening my hands. Myself as a traveler, maps creased in my pocket. The room held them all at once, a quiet museum of me's that never were. The aliens, if that's what I should call them, waited in the spaces between. I never saw them directly. Instead, I felt them, like presences leaning toward me in a crowded room, curious without pressing. They borrowed each version of me, wearing it like a cloak, then released it again, careful not to tear the seams. I whispered, not with voice, but with thought. Longing is the shadow of choice. It is the echo that follows the step you didn't take. The journal accepted the words. They appeared as if I had written them, and below, another line formed, shaky but determined. We cannot choose. We only observe. Teach us the ache of choosing. I breathed slowly. To ache, I thought, is to be human. To ache is to love one path enough to let the others fall away. I thought of the painting I never painted, the lessons I never taught, the journeys I never took. I let the ache swell softly, not painful, but tender, like pressing a bruise to remember it is there. The room responded. The mug filled with water on its own, and in the water floated small lights, drifting like petals across a stream. I lifted it and drank. The taste was both mine and not mine, a flavor of memory from a life I never lived but could almost recall. When I set the mug down, the curtain stirred without breeze. A faint figure formed in the folds, a shape outlined in light, featureless but kind. It leaned as though listening. Teach us, it wrote in the journal. Show us how to dream beyond what is. I placed the seed case on the desk. It opened gently, unfolding into 3 strands of brightness that braided and unbraided, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The journal pages turned and sketches appeared. Skies I had never painted, words I had never spoken, places I had never walked. The aliens were trying on my possibilities, tasting them like fruit offered at a market. I felt no fear, only wonder and a strange affection for these unseen companions who wanted nothing more than to learn what it meant to imagine. I spoke softly into the room. Dream of what you cannot hold. Dream of what you will never touch, but love anyway. That is the shape of being human. The figure in the curtain brightened, then dimmed, as if nodding. The hum swelled around me, cradling me, and I drifted again into deeper sleep, carrying their borrowed dreams with me. When I woke to the ordinary morning, the journal was closed, the mug empty, the seed case quiet in its dish. But beside it lay something new, a slip of fabric the color of dawn, woven with threads of faint starlight, folded as carefully as a gift. And written on the first page of the journal, in my softened hand, one simple line: we are beginning to dream. The days that followed carried me like a slow river, ordinary on the surface, yet glowing underneath. Work, errands, the daily rhythm of small obligations, all of it softened by the memory of nights in that dream room where the curtain breathed and the journal spoke. I began to wonder which side of my life was more real, the waking hours that asked so little of me, or the nights that asked me to explain what it means to be human. The seed case remained on my desk, pulsing faintly now, even in daylight. Sometimes I caught myself leaning closer, listening for the rhythm of its threads. They still braided and unbraided, but I noticed something new. Moments when the strands held their form steady and sure, as if practicing. I thought of a child learning to stand, trembling at first, then balanced for an instant. Each time it steadied, the hum in the room deepened, and a warmth reached me like sunlight through glass. That night, the transition into dream was seamless. One moment I lay on the bed, eyes heavy. The next, I was standing again in the room that was mine, but not mine. Its edges glowed as though painted by memory itself. The books hummed faintly. The journal waited open on the desk. And this time, the curtain figure did not remain only a silhouette. It stepped gently forward, carrying no face, no sharp lines, only the soft suggestion of form, as if made of woven dusk. I felt them more than saw them. Their presence was calm, expectant, kind. They tilted slightly, like someone leaning in to catch every word. The journal stirred beneath my hand. A new question emerged, written slowly, as though their hand had grown steadier with practice. When you dream of another life, how do you know which life to keep? I breathed, long and slow. How do any of us know? I thought of my younger selves, of roads turned away from, of all the futures I had once believed inevitable but let dissolve like mist. I spoke with thought, the way we had learned to. You don't always know. You walk forward with hope, and longing becomes your shadow. You live one life and carry the ghosts of the others inside you. The journal wrote back at once, the letters firmer now. We feel the ghosts. They frighten us. Not all ghosts are fear, I answered. Some are companions. Some are gentle reminders of what mattered enough to imagine. They keep us honest.
The figure leaned closer. Its outline shimmered, and then, unexpectedly, it extended something toward me. Not a hand exactly, but a ripple of brightness, trembling. I hesitated, then lifted my own hand, palm open. When we touched, it was like pressing my skin against warm rain. The hum deepened, and my vision filled with images. Not just my alternate lives, this time theirs. Fragments of their existence cascaded into me. Vast plains of crystal grass bending in winds that carried no sound. Skies where two suns set together in muted gold. Cities built of translucent stone where walls shifted like tides. I felt their lives layered, but flat, without the ache of choice. They lived every possibility at once, never forced to decide, never learning the shape of regret or longing. And in that moment, I understood their need. To them, dreaming was not imagination, it was overflow, a
a flood of too many paths with no anchor. They wanted the tether, the bittersweet gravity of decision. I whispered, half to myself, "You want the weight." The journal's ink glowed brighter, responding, "Yes, teach us weight." I thought of the seed case and how its threads had steadied, trying to hold form. Perhaps that was their attempt at weight. I remembered my own longing, how it sits heavy but precious in the chest. I placed a hand over my heart and spoke softly. Weight is what happens when you say yes to one life. It is loss and love together. It hurts, but it also makes everything shine brighter. The figure trembled, as though absorbing the words. The hum shifted, slower now, as if practicing gravity itself. The seed case pulsed in time with my heartbeat. The journal turned one final page. A sentence formed, sure and glowing. "Will you give us one of your dreams so we may learn to carry it?" I felt the air around me pause, a hush, as if every unseen presence leaned closer to hear my answer. I closed my eyes. Inside me bloomed an image I had carried for years, a dream of standing by the sea at dusk, a lantern in hand, waiting for someone who never arrived, a dream of hope mixed with ache, of patience without reward. I had never told anyone about it, yet it lived with me, quietly, a private star. Yes, I thought, I will share this one. The seed case opened, and its threads reached for me. The figure in the curtain pressed its shimmering form closer. For an instant, my chest felt both heavy and free, as if a long-kept secret had been lifted and given away. The dream flowed out, gentle and unresisting, carried into their woven light. The hum deepened once more, then stilled. The room brightened, as if dawn had slipped in ahead of schedule. The figure bowed slightly, gratitude without words, and stepped back into the curtain. On the final page of the journal, one line wrote itself, steady and certain. "We will remember." And then I woke. The mug sat on my desk, its stars fixed and quiet. The journal lay closed, my pen tucked neatly inside. The seed case no longer pulsed. It rested still, as though sleeping. And yet in my chest, the ache of that given dream lingered, weighty and beautiful, like a lantern I no longer needed to carry alone. Morning came with a softness I hadn't felt in years, as though the air itself had been gentled overnight. I sat at the desk, watching the seed case in its quiet stillness. It no longer pulsed, no longer braided its threads, but it seemed changed. Not lifeless, but settled, like a stone that has finally found its resting place in a riverbed. The journal was closed, yet I did not rush to open it. Some things do not need to be hurried. I touched the cover lightly, and in that silence, I felt the presence of the ones who had borrowed my dreams. Not pressing, not waiting for another word, just present, like a memory that has agreed to stay without needing to announce itself. For days after, I moved through life as before, making tea, folding laundry, walking beneath trees that whispered in their leaf language. But inside each ordinary moment, a new layer had taken root. I found myself noticing small things with more weight. The pause before a bird launched itself from a branch, the faint bruise in an apple, the sound of footsteps fading at the end of a hallway. Each detail glowed with the quiet reminder that choices are heavy, and in their heaviness lies beauty. Sometimes at night, I dreamed again of the sea and the lantern I had given away. But the dream no longer ached the way it once had. Instead, I felt it from a distance, like a song sung by someone else, but still carrying my tune. I would wake with a calm certainty. They had it now, and in holding it, they had learned something of what it means to long. One evening, as dusk crept up to the window, I noticed the mug on my desk glowing faintly. The stars and its glaze drifted once more, but differently than before. They no longer wandered aimlessly across the surface. They formed a small constellation, steady and deliberate, as though deciding to hold their place. I smiled, understanding. They were practicing wait. I opened the journal then, at last. A single new sentence waited, written in my softened script. We dream now, and when we wake, the dream remains. I closed the book, not because I wished to end the conversation, but because the words felt final in their own way. Final, but not closed, like a door left unlocked, a lantern left burning low. The hum no longer filled the room as it once had. Instead, I carried it inside me, a rhythm beneath the rhythm of my own heart. And in quiet moments, walking, breathing, waiting, I felt them still, like companions who had learned enough to wander on their own, but who would never forget where they first learned the shape of longing. Perhaps they would return one night. Maybe they would not. But I understood now that every choice, every ache, every alternate life left unlived was not wasted. It was weight. It was light. It was the language of being human. And somewhere, far beyond the sky, I could see a gentle species dreaming with me still. Some rooms belong to us, and some belong to memory. But every borrowed room reminds us we are never dreaming alone.
Disclaimer: all stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional. They are created to inspire imagination, reflection, and thoughtful dialogue about the future, our relationships, and the human experience.
Glitch recorded. Returning to standby.